What's up, Flaniverse? We are back for Monday Night Football. We've got a two-game doubleheader tonight. Got the Bucs at the Texans and the Chargers at the Raiders. Should be a fun slate. Adam and I are going to go position by position, break it down. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, defenses, and kickers. And then at the end, might play with some lineups or take any questions you have. But generally, just going position by position here.
There's
Adam,
no kickers on a two-game slate, Neil.
Yeah. This is not Showdown. Good call. That'll be for later. I'll probably go over the Showdown slate a little bit in my breakdown tonight before lock. But yeah, for this one, we're just going to be breaking down the two-game slate here on this show.
First time I've ever listened to a co-host talk, and maybe I should do it more because just save the show.
Yeah, appreciate you letting people know that we're not going to talk about kickers. I'm sure everybody was like, whoa. I'm not going to listen to the show if you're going to talk about kickers.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, you just saved the show. So I appreciate that, Adam. How did your week 2 go so far? I think you had some sweats yesterday. I think we were in kind of a similar position yesterday where it was like pretty good, but then not quite getting there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yesterday was okay. I came out slightly ahead on the main slate, gave it back plus some on the showdown slate, which just went to shit. That game was awful. I hate your team. I hate your quarterback. The main slate was just one of those like, I mostly played single entry stuff, and I didn't MME, and I wish I had MME because a lot of the stuff that I had on my show yesterday was super Lions heavy, and I would have liked to have a lot of those lineups, but it was fine. Didn't lose a ton, and that's always a win.
Yeah, the Lions ended up being a pretty big part of what I was doing more and more throughout the weekend. So by the time I did my FanDuel Run the Sims breakdown, I was really into it. I talked about the Lions a little bit that game in the DraftKings Run the Sims breakdown also. But yeah, just got more and more into it. And in the end, it wasn't even intentional. I was just trying to have like a lot of Lions, but ended up with like 25% Amon-Ra St. Brown. so that was obviously very helpful and over the field on Jared Goff. But almost all of my Lions stacks also had Sam Laporta. So that was the part that I ended up really kicking myself about. If you just have JMO in there instead, then you'd feel a lot better.
Yeah, that the thing kind of saving me, like when I built my lineups on my show, I had a lot of St. Brown. I don't think I had a lot of JMO. I don't remember. Maybe I did. I know I barely had any Jamar Chase, so I assumed that I would have had trouble getting to the top, but I did also have a lot of Puka, so I don't know, maybe I would have had some good like Amon-Ra plus Puka lineups or something. But yeah, the one thing that made me like not go completely insane yesterday was that I knew I wasn't gonna have a lot of Chase.
Yeah, I mean, so Chase did really well, but we also had like Malik Neighbors did really well. There were so many different ways.
I did have Neighbors. I had Puka, so like I might have been able to find a good lineup or two.
Yeah, even like I think the Cowboys didn't really work out. That was one that I was really into, was the Dak double stack. And I think both CD and Pickens ended up being fine. And like, it could have been a good thing if you also had the Giants bring back, but yeah, ultimately didn't quite get there. Finished in the top 80, I think, in the FanDuel Millie. So felt good about the process. I only had 60 lineups there. Of course, used Run the Sims. So it was pretty happy with the results on the main slate yesterday. Anyway, we on the show again, we're going to be going game by game. We're not going to be doing a ton of like running the Sims on the show. I think it's going to be more just analysis of the slate, but I do highly recommend Run the Sims to anybody who wants to check it out. You can use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment on any of their products, whether you want what I use, which is the highest level, or you can just use I actually have not used the optimizer at all, Adam, yet. I'm not sure. Have you tried using the optimizer? I assume not, because you have access to everything, but I assume it's just a classic optimizer with the Run the Sims projections.
Yeah, normal optimizer has our baseline projections, like not the sim projections if you would rather use those. But yeah, I mean, I use the Sims for everything.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so two gamer, obviously a little bit of a different analysis than a full game. So actually, one more thing before we get into it. How are you feeling now about your Jacory Krosky fade? Because after week 1, of course, everybody was crapping all over you. He did nothing in week 2, but then Austin Eckler got hurt. So now it's like, ultimately, is this bullish or bearish for JCM?
I mean, it's certainly not bad for him, I don't think.
Well, yeah.
It takes away... It makes it easier for him to potentially get passing game work. Like in the short term, I assume that you're just going to see a lot of McNichols because he's a very good pass blocker. They'll use him in that role. They just signed Chase Edmonds to the practice squad. That's another, passing game guy that maybe ends up getting elevated and just sort of takes the Eckler third down role. But I mean, it's certainly not a bad thing. The only, I guess, potential The only way it's possibly bad for JCM is like now they activate Rodriguez. And what if Rodriguez just goes out there and smashes and it's like, oh shit, okay, we have to play this guy. But like you're not running that risk when they're giving carries to Eckler because he's not going to smash. We know that on the ground. So like that's the only negative, but like obviously that's not super likely to happen. So I mean, it can't be a bad thing for him.
I didn't mean is the injury to Eckler bad for? I meant like his bad game. Like he was just not that good and not that used in that game. So I mean,
overall, I mean, so that's kind of the thing too. And I hadn't really made this argument about it before, but somebody had mentioned it to me like, well, it was a bad game script for him. The Commanders are very likely to be in a lot of neutral and like and trailing games this year. They have a tough schedule. They were fluky last year. I mean, I'm a Commanders fan, but I don't think they're that good. Like, I think they're going to have a lot more Packers type game scripts than Giants type game scripts this year, which was kind of the issue is I don't know how valuable a first and second down guy is on a team that probably isn't playing with a ton of like really comfortable leads. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of just what you expected. Like, I thought as a fan, like they should have been giving him more carries than Eckler. I mean, they're just running Eckler up the middle every play. Like it couldn't be worse. But yeah, I thought it was kind of just sort of what you expected.
Yeah. I mean, all right, that didn't work. Was trying to trap Adam into saying some more negative stuff about JCM so I could clip it.
I just tweeted that Chase Edmonds is better than him, which
all right, you'll do it yourself. You don't need me to trap you into talking trash about JCM. On a similar note, for my takes, Brandon says I had a horrible dream last night that I watched J.J. McCarthy play football. My biggest stance this year was like, this is a good opportunity for me to buy into the Vikings in best ball. I bought so much of the Vikings offense, both the passing game and the running game. A lot of my portfolio is Vikings, so really need the offense to start clicking. And so far, it's had one quarter where it's looked pretty good, and 3 quarters where it's looked atrocious. I am still not totally out. Everybody's giving up on JJ McCarthy. I'm not there yet. He had his first kid 3 days ago, three days before the game. I'm sure that he is sleep deprived. It's his first home game. I can make a billion excuses for him. So I'll continue to make
an NFL game.
His second NFL game.
Probably the biggest excuse.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. But then also he was pressured a ton because the Vikings' best offensive lineman, Christian Darrisaw, is still out. We weren't expecting that to start the year. Then they lost their center in the mid game. They have multiple snap issues. So I'm not buying this as like this is who he is yet. I'm a little bit nervous, but
yeah, I mean, crazy thing, but judging a player to be really good or really bad after 1 or 2 games is usually not the right answer. Yeah, I mean, like I wish I had less like Jefferson or McCarthy in best ball, but also, I mean, the ceiling's still there. Like it's a really talented team. You just need McCarthy to figure out how to play quarterback. And like you said, they lost their center, which is huge. They already were missing a lineman anyway. I mean,
the excuses are there.
Good. It's not good. But
I wish I had less right now, but I'm not giving up on it yet. I'm not like my portfolio is dead because
like you can at least see that there is some underlying talent there. It's not like he's out there just incapable of like running around or making plays or doing anything. Like there's underlying talent. He just doesn't look ready.
He's just he's getting pressured a lot, and then he's I think a little bit nervous out there because he's pressured so much, just like trying to force it really quickly. I don't know, just doesn't look smooth yet. But I agree that I think the underlying talent is still there. Clearly has a cannon for an arm. Anyway, we'll move on from talking about my quarterback to talking about the quarterbacks on this slate. Again, it's just 2 games, but with 2 games, we have 4 quarterbacks to talk through. And I'll go through the ownership here. So we've got Baker Mayfield at 18% projected ownership, CJ Stroud at 22% projected ownership. And then we have Justin Herbert, 29%. Geno Smith 31%. So we actually you have Geno Smith as the chalkiest quarterback of the 4 of them. I think other places maybe have Herbert as a little bit chalkier than Geno. But in general, how are you feeling about the quarterbacks on this slate? Do you think you're gonna have more from the Tampa game or the Chargers game? What do you think what are you gonna end up with?
So pulling up the lineups that I built before the show now. Getting to a lot of Geno and then some Stroud and Mayfield. Actually barely have any Herbert right now, which I don't love. I do like Geno, and I will say, we haven't even gotten to receiver yet, but I'm having an issue like making Jacoby Myers be remotely close to the prop market in terms of like I've kind of tried to lower everything I possibly can to get him close, and I've gotten him closer. But I think that's driving a lot of my Geno as well. Is I absolutely love Jacoby Myers here, especially at that price. So it's pulling up Geno also. We saw them continue to be a pass heavy offense. Last year they were pass heavy. Obviously, they weren't very good, so that has something to do with it as well. But you have a Chip Kelly offense now, which generally from a pace standpoint is good. They threw the ball, I think, like 41% of the time last week, something in that range. It was even lower on just neutral plays. So I like I like Geno. I like the passing game. He's cheap. He's got solid options with Myers and then probably Bowers. So I'm getting to a lot of Geno. I like the price tag. I am more concerned that I barely have any Herbert. That's probably just because he is projected for similar ownership to Geno, and Geno is cheaper. And I think we haven't projected like slightly higher even. So that's probably really what it is. There is, anytime you have two players that project to be similarly owned and they're similarly priced, or one is cheaper, I'm fine with the idea of like, okay, I'm just going to really hammer getting to the one that I think projects better than the more expensive one. So like from a process standpoint, I'm fine with it. But I do think that, obviously not having Herbert is scary because he is willing to run. You get rushing upside from him. He has multiple good pass catchers with McConkey and Allen and Johnston as a deep threat. It's a team that like we know that they will throw also. It's not actually a run heavy team like people sometimes make it out to be. So it's certainly not, if I don't get to Herbert, it's certainly not because I don't think he's a good player. I don't like him. It's just with the way things are projected right now, I do prefer getting to Geno.
Yeah, that I think I like that game better than the other game, than the Baker and CJ Stroud in general. I like Geno and Herbert a little bit better. You can see here a little bit of a difference in ownership at RG, where they have Herbert at 32%, Geno at 22%. Obviously, that's going to make some difference. But yeah, Geno to me does stand out as the quarterback that I'm most inclined to get to for a lot of the reasons that you just laid out. I also like some of his other cheaper pass catchers that are going to be pretty contrarian, I think. So just there's a lot to like with the Geno stacks. I do wonder if that does, lend toward your ownership projections being more likely, just because it is so easy to stack up Geno. So such cheap stacks, and then you can play whoever you want around it. That maybe this 31% would not really surprise me. I also just want to pull up some of the metrics we can look at. So schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game over the final 5 games of last year, which again, this is last year, new defenses. So things are going to change year over year, but just to give you an idea of where we were at to end the year, we had none of these defenses were like awesome matchups. Vegas was a better than average matchup for quarterbacks at the end of last year. Houston pretty neutral, Chargers pretty neutral, and then Tampa was pretty well below average matchup last year. So for whatever that's worth. And then for this week, so the run pass report, we can just look at the this is the weekly pass rate over expectation report. So from week 1, we can see where the teams rank. The Chargers second in terms of pass rate over expectation in week 1. So to your point, they weren't really a run heavy team last week. It was kind of up in the air. I think like coming into last year, people thought they were going to want to run a lot, and then towards the end of the year, they started passing more, and it was unclear if that was because their running game was just so ineffective, or that's like they just decided they realized Harbaugh fell in love with Justin Herbert. Nobody really knew exactly what it meant, but yeah, they were certainly in week 1 a pass heavy team. Raiders also 4th, which I didn't realize how high up they were on the list. The Bucs 6th, so 3 in the top 6, and then interestingly, it was the Texans were more run heavy, despite having 0 run game. So a little bit of a surprise there. Yeah, so it's interesting from that perspective. How would you rank your interest in the quarterbacks?
So one other thing I wanted to mention with the Herbert versus Smith exposures that I personally have right now, the aggregate ownership that I used to build lineups actually had Herbert up at 40% and Geno at 25. So it is something where like when we get closer to lock, if Geno's ownership has come up, which I think it should or probably will, and Herbert's comes down, then obviously I'm not going to be quite as extreme there. But I do, the point stands, I really like Geno. For the other two, for Stroud and Mayfield, I'm pretty much around the field. I think that they're fine, but I am with you that I really like the Chargers-Raiders game. Both teams, like you said, were very aggressive with the passing game in week one. And I don't think either of those, maybe they'll probably regress closer, to average because that's how things work. But the fact that they both were throwing the ball a lot wasn't really surprising. I don't think it wasn't like, oh wow, this is completely unexpected or anything like that. I think you do continue to see them throw plenty going forward. So I do like that. Stroud, you still have question marks around exactly how good he is. But also you have the O-line issues in Houston. You do have obviously a dominant receiver there. You have dominant receivers for Mayfield also. So there is still upside in getting to those guys. And I am right around the field getting like 18, 19, 20% of both of them. But right now, at least for me, $5,300 Geno is the clear one.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for me, which could end up looking foolish because it is CJ Stroud, Baker Mayfield. I think might be talented. Like they might be the second and third most talented quarterbacks on the slate. Geno might be fourth, but just from a game environment perspective and a price perspective, stacking perspective, just a lot to like about Geno. Christopher says you can't run on the Chiefs. Chargers played the Chiefs last week, so he's saying maybe they run a little bit more when they're not playing the Chiefs. Yeah, it's possible. We'll see it. Maybe Harbaugh is adjusting to different. I'm sure he's adjusting to different defenses to some extent, but still, second is a pretty high pass rate over expectation last week. Thank you for the reminder. Emwald, yeah, please do like the video while you're coming in. And if you're not already subscribed, would appreciate it. Trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. Hopefully get to 5,000 by the end of this week and make that goal more attainable. So would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. Adam and I are doing these.
To that point, last season teams ran against Kansas City about 41% of the time. They ran against the Raiders about 44 to 45%.
Yeah. Okay. You see how much Adam's listening to me, just talking about subscribing to the channel, and he's just to that point breaks in with talking about the quarterbacks. We're back mid-season form here.
I meant to the point in chat, not to your point.
Oh, okay. Of course, you're not listening to me; you're listening to chat. Okay. And any other notes on the quarterbacks?
No.
Yeah, I think we covered it pretty well. Pretty flat ownership overall is what I would note. Like none, like Geno, the highest at 30.9% is kind of insane on a 2-game slate. You often will see one quarterback like really be the favorite by far at 45% or something. So this is pretty flat ownership. You can kind of play whoever you want, play into the game environments you want. It's just that we have really tougher defenses in the Tampa Houston game, the other game, the Chargers game, 4-point higher over under. Okay, let's move on to talk about running backs. And we can take a look at the
more total plays too, as a reminder.
Say it again.
More passing can also lead to more total plays.
Sure. Yeah,
which is just good for everybody.
Yeah. What you can see here in the pace. This is pace. It essentially just means the number of plays that the team is expected to run, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. So moving on to running backs, we've got Bucky Irving is 7,200. I guess we can start with like the primary. No, I'll go over both. So all the running backs you could consider on the Buccaneers, it's Bucky Irving at 7,200, projected for 72% ownership. So a ton of ownership on Bucky. Rachaad White is 4,700, projected for just 3% ownership. Sean Tucker, I'm debating if we should do this game by game so we can look at the usage. What do you think? Would that be easier than, or do we want to go down?
I think game by game is kind of easier.
Okay.
When there's
let's do that. All right. So the Buccaneers, Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, and Bucky Irving. Rachaad White projected for 3% ownership. Sean Tucker, virtually zero ownership. I can pull up last week's bell cow report so we can see how the usage looked last week. But how are you feeling about 72% ownership going to Bucky? I guess that's a good place to start. And then are you playing any of Rachaad White or Sean Tucker?
I have more Bucky than that right now. I'm pushing 100% on him at 7,200. I think we're a little above market on him, but also, we saw him really, obviously he had a big role all season last year, but then you saw him really take over down the stretch, and nothing in week one suggested that that's really changing. He had, I believe, handled like 60% of the overall carries in week one. But that was also a game where Mayfield had 5 carries, 5 of the team's like 24. That's more than, more of the rushing market share than Mayfield is typically going to have by a little bit. So you could even see it go up on Irving. But he had 14 carries. Rachaad White had 2. Sean Tucker had 1. Again, not that you're going to get a carbon copy every single week, but there was nothing about game 1's usage that suggests that the uptick we saw from Bucky Irving last year down the stretch was just because, it was a playoff run or anything like that. It kind of just seems like you've gone from, it's still a timeshare, but it's much less of a timeshare, it seems like, than it was in the middle of last season. And then he's also still clearly very involved in the passing game as well, running a lot of routes, pulling that sheet back up. But he ran around 55%, give or take, of routes for Tampa Bay last week as well. That's compared to like 21% for Rachaad White. So clearly just the number one guy there in every aspect. I think he just still looks really good at 7,200.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly very involved, as you pointed out. Here, these are the numbers from last week for anybody interested. Not particularly good last week, 2.64 yards per carry in that game, but he was super involved. And we know that he is talented, so I'm not like worried about his how good he was last week. The bigger concern coming in was like maybe he would lose some of that passing worker. Rachaad White would take back more of the passing game involvement. That wasn't really a concern at all in week 1. Rachaad White just 19% route participation, just saw 1 target to Bucky Irving's, like you said, 57%, 4 targets, super involved in the passing game. Yeah, looks pretty good there. As far as the matchup goes, I think that it's a tough matchup, but let me fact check myself. So the final 5 games of the year, like Houston's just a good defense in general. Yeah, no, it was a negative defense for running backs in particular as well, at least like bottom third here. But enough involvement can clearly offset a tough matchup with Houston's defense. I don't know. I suspect I'll come in a little bit underweight on Bucky, but that's also because I'm probably going to be playing some of the more contrarian plays and just kind of like hoping that some of the expensive running backs fail a little bit. So I suspect I'll be slightly underweight, but yeah, I can't really argue too much with the 72%, given that he just has elite workload and we have only 2 games to work with. And did you say you're getting to any Rachaad White or Sean Tucker?
I right now am not getting to Sean Tucker. I am not getting to Rachaad White. I don't mind what you're saying, where especially like Rachaad White at 4,700 and virtually no ownership, like it wouldn't be surprising at all if you get some sort of week 2 bounce back for him. Even, not even talking like Bucky Irving injury or anything like that, just a natural being more involved in the passing game for Rachaad White. Like that obviously can happen and he's really cheap. Or you just get, a big play from him, or you get a random goal line carry for some reason. It's not like that's crazy. Like for Sean Tucker, I think it's much more, if you're going there, it's like something really weird happened, I think, because there's nothing to really suggest that they're going to go to that like 3 running back timeshare that they briefly did last year. So to me, Tucker is more of the like, just absolute dart throw. White is a very reasonable, okay, like there's still going to be volatility in usage here, even though it does look like Irving really does have a stranglehold. So I think, that's fine. I don't have it right now. Again, I'm just pretty much jamming Bucky, but that one makes more sense to me, especially because with Tucker too at 4K, like he's not somebody that's likely to really ever be involved in the passing game. So with White, at least, you can get a decent score from him just because he catches 3 passes. And then, maybe if the other running backs just all sort of fail, you have a cheap guy that didn't kill you instead of an expensive guy that did kill you. Whereas with Tucker, it's like he, I guess, has to get into the end zone to have any chance at being decent.
Normally I like these running backs better who have at least some standalone value, like Rachaad White. So like you said, Rachaad White, just in a regular game script, could have 3 catches for 30 yards. And like at his price tag, that doesn't kill you. That's six fantasy points. That's all you really need. Whereas Sean Tucker, it's like, yeah, he's probably got contingent upside. Maybe in a blowout, he would come in. Maybe if there's an injury, like we know that he can be good when he plays. We have no indication from last week that they're planning on using him. Even if he gets 1 carry, it's like, yeah, if he gets 1 carry, sure, if he scores a touchdown on that carry, I guess he pays off his price tag, but it's just a little bit less likely to happen. So I do prefer Rachaad White Probably not going to get to Sean Tucker. I sometimes like to get to the backup running backs on these 2 game slates just because it's so difficult to get different, and they obviously have awesome contingent upside. So it is just like there is a clear situation where, like, if the starter goes down, the backup might be a smash play at 0 ownership. But yeah, I think I'll play maybe a little bit of Rachaad White, but I actually mean from different games. I'll play lower owned running backs. I don't think from this team. I'll play a little bit of Rachaad White. He also was dealing with a groin injury. Like, there was some question if he was going to be ready for the start of the season. But like, I think there was a quote on August 21st in the Coach Speak Index that he was looking fresh. So I think he was healthy enough that I don't think that was, keeping his usage down last week. So I think it is just the Bucky show for the most part. But I think Rachaad White is a viable low owned play. All right. And then the other game here, Nick Chubb is 5,000 projected for 32% ownership. Dameon Pierce, 4,200 projected for 1.6% ownership. Woody Marks, 4,500 projected for just under 1%. Daria Gumbawale is 4,000 projected for 5% ownership. So some really interesting coach speak surrounding the running backs. And let me actually pull up the bell cow report here. Oops. So last week it was Nick Chubb had 13 carries, Daria Gumbawale 2, Dameon Pierce 3, Woody Marks 3, Jacob Johnson, apparently he's the fullback, doesn't really matter. 1 target for Chubb, 2 for Gumbawale, 1 for Pierce, 0 for Woody Marks. Just like all 4 of them were used in some capacity last week, and apparently they're all getting some ownership. But let me just read off some of the coach speak here, because I think it's kind of interesting. So in the post-game presser, D'Amico Ryans, I'll just read off the running back stuff. I saw a couple of runs where Nick Chubb definitely ran the ball well. He did a really good job of gaining some yardage, which we've seen him do multiple times. Nick is a great player, and of course, we'd love to see him get going more. Before the game, he had said Nick Chubb won't surprise me in the game. You know what you're getting with Nick Chubb. I thought there's, we have a lot of running back depth, 4 guys that can run the ball and make plays for us. So there was a thought to get all those guys some touches and try to keep our guys as fresh as possible. And then later, so on the 10th, he said, I think Nick Chubb ran the ball really well last week. We tried to mix it up with the other backs. We're going to try to lean in with Chubb a little bit more. I think he deserves it. He's shown that he continued to get better as the game went on. You see him running stronger, finishing plays in a physical manner. So we got to get him going a little bit more. I think he can really help us. Notably, the Coach Speak Index gives D'Amico Ryans a 55% reliability rating on usage and workload Coach Speak, which is really low. But then offensive coordinator Nick Caley on the 12th reiterated that Nick Chubb gets stronger as the game goes on. He said on what Woody Marks needs to do to earn more reps, Woody Marks and Jalen Noel. Actually, he said just being consistent and consistently going out there and producing. They have good plays throughout camp. It's just a matter of going out there and being consistent version of themselves and working hard. So I think generally my takeaway from the coach, because we kind of wanted to give them all opportunities, and now we want to lean into Nick Chubb a little bit more. Is that your takeaway also?
Yeah, like I still expect it to be kind of a messy backfield, but I clearly think that Chubb is running back 1. And I kind of view it as like 2 different backfields too, sort of, where like Chubb and Pierce are your running backs and Agumbawale and Marks are your passing down, third down type guys. So I kind of, make that distinction as well. Like if I'm going to add carries to Chubb, I'm mostly taking those away from Pierce. Although I guess you could make the case that maybe Woody Marks just doesn't step on the field. But I still think that would be more of like a Agumbawale is just out there more in that case. So I did add a little bit to Chubb. I took a little bit away from Pierce. You still have a shitty O-line. You have a running back in Chubb that who knows what he is at this stage of his career. I am still getting like 20 to 30% right now. At 5K, I think he looks fine as a value play. Like the less Irving you're playing, the less Genty you're playing, the more you should just be playing Nick Chubb, because he at least does have a real role here. He's priced similarly to Rachaad White and to Najee Harris, who there's no reason to assume either of them have even a remotely comparable role to Nick Chubb. So from a value standpoint, I think he looks good. The issue just starts to come in at exactly how popular does he end up being, because you do have legitimately really good running backs on this slate with Irving, with Genty. Obviously, we didn't see a lot of production from Hampton, and he probably does get Najee cutting into him more this week, but he's also only 5,600. He can, catch passes and do stuff in the passing game as well. So there is opportunity cost there where if Nick Chubb, goes for 2.2x his salary or something, even though it's only a 2-game slate, there's still a real chance that you didn't get enough raw points if he just scores like 10, 11, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good breakdown. Like Nick Chubb, obviously more likely to score more fantasy points than like a Najee Harris, but then it really comes down to, is he going to be super high owned? I was reading the quotes and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to want to play some Nick Chubb because nobody else is going to want to play him. But then we're seeing across the industry 30 to 40% projected ownership on Nick Chubb. And to me, I don't really love that, even if they are going to lean in on him more, because they have a terrible offensive line going up against a really good defensive line on the Bucs. So it's just, man, this is a kind of a tough spot here for Nick Chubb. But the coaches say they want to use him more, so I can't really argue too much with around 30% Nick Chubb. Are you in your first run? Are you getting around where the field is, or are you overweight?
I'm a little lower. I have like 22%.
I think that's about where I'd want to be. Like, I don't want to super lean in on Nick Chubb. I kind of want to be in the spot. It's like sort of like playing like Nerdy 10, where it's like, because I think there's a wide range of outcomes for his ownership. I kind of want to play like what I think is efficient ownership for Nick Chubb, which obviously hard to calculate what that would be. But I think that feels about right. Like around 22%. If the field comes in lower than that, I'll be happy to be above weight. If they come in higher than that, I'll be happy to be underweight. I don't know. I think that's about right to me.
Yeah. And I mean, the issue outside of the line, when you look at his pass game involvement last week, he ran routes on like 26% of passing plays, which was technically the most on the team, but it's still not a lot at all. Agumbawale was at like 24%, and then you were around 10% on both of Pierce and Marks. So like he has a role, but it's not a big one. So that, and then it, also just goes back to, you have Agumbawale / Marks as a clear passing game guy. So I don't think there's a lot of reason to think that Nick Chubb's passing game role really changes a whole lot this week from last week.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we'll both be. Are you playing any of the other Texans running backs at all?
I had 1 out of 150 Agumbawale.
Okay, that sounds about right. Somebody here said that they liked your. I'm trying to find. Somebody said they liked your tweet about JJ McCarthy needs to get rid of the war paint because he looks like an idiot or something like that, which I did not see your tweet, but I do not appreciate it and actually highly disagree.
No, I didn't say he looks like an idiot or he needs to get rid of it. I said he needs to dial it back until he can play at least average football.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that is
right now he looks like an idiot.
To me, he looks way cooler with the war paint than without. He just looks like too young without it, I guess. Like, doesn't look like an NFL quarterback.
Exactly. Like, he doesn't look like an NFL quarterback when he's playing quarterback right now.
Yeah, I don't actually entirely disagree with your point. I think once he starts, he needs to earn the war paint because he looks cool with the war paint, but he does need to back it up.
I was a black guy when I played baseball, but you look like an idiot when you're playing horribly, and then they show you on the sideline, and like
fair point. Okay, all right, then I can't disagree too much, I guess. All right, let's move on to the second game. Chargers and Raiders. Chargers have Omari and Hampton, 5,800 projected for 44% ownership. Najee Harris, 4,800 projected for 6% ownership. They're the only running backs getting any kind of ownership on the Chargers. I'll bring up the bell. Actually, let me look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed again at the running back position. So it was, where can we see? Am I missing anybody? Right, kind of middle of the field matchup against the Raiders. Houston, a slight negative matchup last year. Tampa, the worst matchup in the NFL last year for running backs. And then I missed one. Chargers, Houston, Tampa, and Vegas was middling. So yeah, they're all kind of bottom half in terms of the matchup, but Tampa clearly the worst matchup for running backs of the group. And now bringing up the Chargers last week. Omari and Hampton played 81% of the snaps. Looked like the very clear lead back. Najee Harris credited here for 11 snaps. Ran 12% of the routes to Hampton's 54. Saw 1 target to Hampton's 2. There was also some interesting coach speak on Najee Harris. Let me pull that up. because I think you could read this, different ways. The coach speak on Najee Harris, which was along the lines of we wanted to play 12 to 15 snaps, and that's what he played. But it could change this week. But let me find the actual quote. Oh yeah. First, he said Omarion Hampton's pass protection really did stand out. He did a great job. He ran the ball strong and fast. He really hit the holes. And then he said, we planned 12 to 15 plays for Najee Harris against the Chiefs. Hit it right at 12. This week could be different, is the quote from Jim Harbaugh. Now you can interpret that any number of ways. Could be higher, could be lower. But to me, if the field's not going to be there, that's kind of an intriguing play. What are you doing with the Chargers backfield?
I'm getting to a lot of Hampton right now. I'm not really getting to Najee, but this is one where I have no idea. Like, it could be an incremental increase in playing time. It could be no increase in playing time. And it could just be, okay, for whatever reason, week one, we wanted him to play 12 plays, and now he's just going to enter a full-time share with Hampton. Like, we don't know. I projected it to still be Hampton's backfield just with more Harris. The prop market right now is around, like, I think an 18.5-yard rushing line on Harris. In spots like this where I really have no idea, I tend to want to kind of just be around, I was talking about it on my show with Tyrone Tracy yesterday, which it actually ended up, I was right and the market was wrong, but I adjusted to the market because it's kind of, I don't have a strong feel for how Najee Harris is going to be used. So it's kind of just like, ask the audience is my view of using the prop market for stuff like that, because I don't think it's a super efficient market. It's beatable with good projections, but I don't know. I don't have a reason to think that I know if Harris is going to play a lot or not. So I basically projected him to play more than last week. I think he plays more than last week. I assume it's still Hampton's backfield overall. The biggest thing for me is that Hampton's just cheap at 5,600, and he did run. You mentioned that Harris, I think, had one target last week. Hampton had two, but the route participation for Hampton was excellent. He ran routes on like 60% of dropbacks. Obviously, that is a part of the game that Harris also can produce in, and so the more he plays, then there is a reasonable expectation that Hampton runs fewer routes, and maybe that's obviously a very valuable spot that Harris cuts into his production. But I like how involved he was last week, even though he wasn't getting targets, just out there running routes. And at 5,600, or 5,800, he doesn't have to do a lot to put up a big game. So he is my favorite of the non Bucky Irving, Ashton Genty running backs. He's in like 2/3 of my lineups right now.
Yeah, I think
I'm not getting to Najee at 4,800, but I think he's very similar to Rachaad White.
I think I like Najee a little bit better just because I think it's more likely that he takes on more of the workload here. Maybe not. Like maybe Omarion Hampton is just like their plan. Maybe he was their plan all along, but it's unclear if they were planning on splitting between Najee Harris and then Omarion Hampton, and then Najee Harris had a fireworks incident and that cut into him, and now he's the one who has to earn his role, as opposed to we were kind of expecting it to be the inverse of that, where it's going to be Omarion Hampton. It's unclear if like that's a situation, or if it's just like they always wanted to play more Omarion Hampton, and this just gave him the opportunity to start earlier. So I like the range of outcomes for like, okay, they were getting Najee into shape. He was at practice a lot in August, and it was just like, he's walking on the sidelines. It was right. Hilarious, the reporting on Najee Harris in the offseason, but I think he's maybe still getting into shape, and maybe I'm taking the quote to mean he could play more snaps this week than he did last week. But yeah, remains to be seen what the case is there. I'll lean into the variance because he's projected for low ownership.
Yeah, and I think kind of like a simpler way to say what you said too is just I'm much more confident in Bucky Irving's role than I am in Omarion Hampton's role.
Yeah, I think that is accurate. I went full screen on our thing and I could not figure out how to get out of it. But I'm back now. We're good. Yeah, I think that I 100% agree with that. Not totally sure on Omarion Hampton's role, but ultimately he's 5,800 in a better matchup. I love Omarion Hampton here. I think I'll also play a bit of Najee Harris. There was also some Jim Harbaugh quote was like, oh, he runs routes like a receiver. So I think there's the possibility that they start using him as like the receiving back, which is obviously really good on PPR sites.
Yeah, very high targets per route run with Pittsburgh last year for him as well.
Yeah. So I think there's some possibility that he is more involved, and it could come in the passing game more, which would obviously be pretty bullish. Maria, we're talking about just the classic slate on this show tonight. I'll be going live actually a little over 2 hours before the slate starts, and on that one I will talk about this slate again, maybe touch on FanDuel a little bit, and then do the showdown slates briefly as well. So I'll be going more in depth on all the other stuff, but on this show we're just talking about the main slate for DraftKings. I assume you're not playing any other running backs on the Chargers.
They have other. No, I'm not playing Haskins.
Yeah, Ashton Genty, and again, I'm sort of making the assumption that Ashton Genty is the only running back we're playing on the radars. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to look closer at is there contingent upside for Zamir White, but Ashton Genty 7,000 projected for 55% ownership. What's your level of interest in Ashton Genty, and are you playing any other Raiders?
I have like 30% right now. It's not. It's sort of like the Herbert thing where it's not being anti-Ashton Genty here. Like he clearly dominated touches for the Raiders last week. You had the Mostert inactive, which is obviously a good sign for him. I expect him to dominate touches here. It's just that for one, really bullish on the Raiders passing game, and I'm just getting to so much of that. Not that precludes you from playing Genty, but also, he's similarly priced to Irving, who, as I mentioned, I'm getting pretty much everywhere. I really like him. And then I'm getting a lot of Hampton as the value guy. So it's kind of just squeezing out Ashton Genty in my lineups. But it's definitely one of those where it's just the way things are working out for me personally, much more than me going in and saying like, I think Genty's too popular. I don't really know why people are playing him this much. I'm happy to be under the field. If I got 70% Irving and 50% Genty, that would also be fine with me. But I'm also fine getting 100% Irving and 30% Genty. The workload for him certainly looked very good in week one, just getting all the touches. You do get not negative correlation, but a different potential game flow as well. If like Genty just dominates on the ground and they do go more run heavy than everybody I think is expecting them to, that obviously would be good. He ran routes on 55% of dropbacks last week. That is obviously very good. So there's a lot to like about Ashton Genty for sure.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm going to play a lot of Ashton Genty. I do imagine I'll be under. I'll have more Bucky than Genty as well as of the two really pay up running backs, but I'll probably get to 40-50%, something like that. And I assume you're not playing any Zamir White.
I am not.
Or Dylan Lobby. Yeah.
No.
I don't think they're necessary on this slate. It'd be one thing if we thought Zamir White was super talented and if he got a role, then he would be awesome. But I don't even know that he has that much contingent upside. All right.
I mean, he's Sean Tucker in a Raiders uniform.
Sean Tucker's better, I think. Sean Tucker's
probably, but if the counter argument there is if we assume Mostert is inactive and Genty gets hurt in the first quarter, every carry is going to White. Whereas if Irving gets hurt, you're still getting a timeshare between the other White and Tucker.
That is a fair point. All right, let's talk receivers on the Bucs. We've got Mike Evans at 6,800 projected for 46% ownership. Mika Egbuka 5,800 projected for 36% ownership. Sterling Shepard just 3,100 projected for 7%. Ryan Miller, Tez Johnson, both min price projected for virtually zero ownership. I assume most of our interest is going to be in Evans and Egbuka. I will pull up the wide receiver data here in the Fantasy Points data suite. Which, by the way, you can also get 15% off the data suite or anything at Fantasy Points using promo code Flannel if this interests you. So last week it was Egbuka led in terms of route participation, 89%, Evans at 84%, Shepard at 70%. So he's actually somebody that I had not looked at this yet. And that does look pretty interesting to me if Sterling Shepard is going to be running 70% of the routes. And he's only getting 7% ownership. I think that seems, I guess, pretty fair. How much you get into of the Bucs receivers?
I'm getting to a lot of Evans and Egbuka. I'm not getting to much Shepard, but I do agree with you. I thought I would be getting a little bit more. But also, we haven't talked about it. I'm getting a lot of Trey Tucker. So, in that price range, that's kind of costing me Shepard. But I do think the fact that Shepard ran so many routes is good. He wasn't really targeted much, which you expect when you are playing with Egbuka, when you are playing with Evans. Egbuka, I'm getting a lot of, and I kind of thought coming into this game, it's a tricky spot where I think he's likely, people are probably going to overvalue him because he did catch the 2 touchdowns last week. He wasn't actually targeted that heavily, But at the same time, I do think it's likely that he gets more targets per route going forward than he did last week. So it kind of just ended up being the situation where I looked at it and I'm like, oh, maybe this will be an edge where people just jam him in, and really it's still, the Mike Evans show in most weeks, just because, he had good touchdown variance last week. But then it's like, well, I'm also just not going to assume that he's only getting 0.16 or whatever it was targets per route run. And so then you end up projecting it, even, putting aside, you're obviously not projecting him to just be the only guy that scores touchdowns. Putting last week aside, he still just projects pretty well here for the price tag. You still expect him to be the number 2 wide receiver on what should be a good passing offense behind Mike Evans. So I still think he looks good. I'm getting to Mike Evans as well. We saw Mike Evans just absolutely dominate targets last year when Godwin went down. Obviously, it's not apples to apples because Egbuka is going to get more targets than Tyler Johnson or whoever was out there when Godwin went down last year. But still clearly like Mike Evans a lot as well. I'm getting to like 48% Evans. I'm getting to 45, 46% Egbuka right now. Puts me pretty close to the field on both guys, a little bit over.
Yep, the field at 46% Evans, 36% Egbuka. I wouldn't be that shocked to see the ownership number. I honestly think these ownership numbers are probably about right. But you never know with like the exciting rookie who just scored 2 touchdowns. If people are just like, I'm going to play all that guy, he's awesome. Hard to know. Let's take a look at the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. I'll look at all the teams at once. So last year over the final 5 games, Vegas was a really strong matchup for receivers. Looks like it was mostly out wide receivers more so than in the slot. Sometimes I just like to note that. Tampa was a slightly negative matchup. Doesn't look like there was any standout individual place that it was different. Chargers also pretty negative. It was a slightly positive for out left receivers. And then Houston was a very bad matchup for receivers. So it was a really tough matchup last year. I think that's holding over this year. It's just going to be a tough matchup. Houston just has a really good defense, so it is going to be a tough spot for the Tampa receivers. It's just good offense meets good defense, kind of a wide range of outcomes, I would say. And then on the other side, so again, Tampa, pretty good defense. Think of them as being a really strong run defense and a decent pass defense as well. We've got the Texans. Nico Collins coming in at he's 7,300, coming in at 56% ownership. Xavier Hutchinson 3,200, coming in at 6% ownership. Then you've got Justin Watson 3,100, Jaden Higgins 4,300, Jalen Knoll 3,300, all coming in 3 to 4% ownership. How much are you getting to of Nico, and then are you playing any of the secondary options, tertiary?
Yeah, I'm getting Nico in about half my lineups. Week 1 certainly was not good and did leave reason for concern. 0.17 targets per route run for him is just not anywhere close to what you expect from him going forward. So, at this point, obviously, you're still projecting him to just be the clear number 1, heavily targeted receiver here. But, that certainly wasn't good to see. But he's also only 7,300. So I'm getting around the field there at 50% or so. Beyond that, you still get a pretty messy timeshare, I would expect, with Houston, even though Christian Kirk is out. Last week, we saw 65 to 70% route participation for Xavier Hutchinson. That wasn't super surprising. There was talk, or not even talk, coming out of preseason. He was ahead of Higgins and Knoll, but he's not like a super productive or highly targeted receiver typically either. 0.09 targets per route run last week. So you have him probably running the second most routes behind Collins, but probably not doing a whole lot with it. He's only in 3% of my lineups. At 3,200, like, there's still touchdown variance. He's still certainly viable, and I probably would have a little bit more if I end up with a little bit less Trey Tucker. So, it's nice that he's out there running routes. You also saw around 50% route participation from Justin Watson, who we know is capable of making big plays. Maybe you start to see some more Jaden Higgins cutting into like Watson and or Hutchinson, but he is a little bit more expensive at 4,300 as well. So I have like 3% Hutchinson, 3% Watson, 1% Higgins, 1% Knoll. So I think if you want, like in large field tournaments, if you wanted to just throw darts at this group and hope somebody just has like the Troy Franklin game where they unexpectedly run way more, run the most routes on the team. Obviously, that's exaggerating in this case, but second most routes on the team, and they actually get targeted a lot. Maybe Tampa Bay just takes away Collins and forces it to somebody in that group. I think it's reasonable, like a reasonable approach to playing a lot of lineups would just be, kind of take shots at all of those cheap guys from Houston. But I don't think any of them look particularly good.
Yeah, they're not really popping as great plays, particularly as we mentioned there. Vegas has a couple easier, cheap guys that are also not getting a ton of ownership. So then you're just not really incentivized to play. And these are, unfortunately, Jalen Noel, Jaden. I shouldn't say unfortunately, it's early in the season, but Jalen Noel, Jaden Higgins, two players that I was drafting a ton in best ball. So they're receivers that I'm hopeful for long term, but not a great matchup with Tampa. And last week, just around 40% rep participation for both, even with Christian Kirk out. Who knows? Maybe we could see Noel with Kirk out play a little bit more from the slot, but which was kind of the expectation that he might take over that role at some point this year. So we could, see an uptick in usage. But yeah, last week it was mostly Collins and Hutchinson. I think Hutchinson probably the most interesting of the secondary, tertiary receivers for right now. Josh asked, what coverage did the Texans play in week 1?
Mostly
I don't know.
Mostly one high.
Where do you find, is that in the data suite or do you find that somewhere else?
Yeah, it's team coverage matrix.
Oh, and you can look up for week 1. I thought that doesn't come into play.
Oh, maybe.
I thought it.
Yeah, it says they've only played one game. 47 or 32 dropbacks.
If I go to receiving, wait, where do I? Oh, you can go team. Oh, all right. I'll pull that up then.
You're welcome, fantasy points. I don't know why you pay Neil.
They don't pay me for this. I guess they pay me commission if people sign up using my code, so they do pay me that. Yeah, I was looking in the wrong spot. I knew it was there somewhere. I was trying to find this the other day. Wait, where's the Texans? Okay, the page is jumping around a little bit.
They're at the bottom.
Gotcha. All right, all the way at the bottom, and this is sorted by dropbacks. So they played, 28% man coverage, 72% single high. Interesting. I don't know who this, maybe I'll have to look at this a little bit closer to see who this benefits. Usually I just like to use the receiving wide receiver coverage matchup. That's just an easy way to tell you like who benefits from this type of coverage, but that is not available until week 4. Okay. So Nico Collins looks pretty good. Sorry, did you say you're getting more
available? It just uses the assumption that they played like last year.
Right. Yeah. And I think it has receivers on wrong teams. I don't think they update it until week 4.
Oh yeah, it doesn't have it wouldn't have Ibuka, but
yeah.
It has it getting neutral for Evans.
Okay. Is this are you getting to more or less than 56% of Nico Collins? Did you say?
I have like 52, 53.
Okay. And then you're getting to not a ton of are you getting to any like Hutchinson?
Not really, like 3% across the board. Appreciate you listening previously.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to do the coverage stuff.
Yeah,
I know I've done this before. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not really getting to them. My again, like Trey Tucker right now is just dominating my cheap wide receiver stuff. So this is very much one of those like personal exposures are going to vary type things. The less Trey Tucker, if you're not playing 70% Trey Tucker, I would play more Sterling Shepard, Hutchinson, Higgins, Noel, Watson. Like these are all very reasonable dart throws. And ideally, I think I would like to be mixing them in a little bit more and not putting my entire night on Trey Tucker.
Yeah, I would. That's a lot. It's a lot of your night if you're playing 70% of Trey Tucker. All right, well let's move on and talk about those other games. By the way, as noted, Christian Kirk is out once again for the Texans. RIP my eliminator bags.
This is the issue that I always run into with trying to use coverage data, by the way. Josh said 72% single high as a bump for Evans vertical routes. Yes, but like they know they're playing Mike Evans this week.
I always struggle with that also, like especially in 1 week. It's like over the course of the season, you can see like, do they adjust for different teams that they're playing against? But yeah, in the first week, I don't know if that's going to hold based on the matchup.
For like looking at the wide receiver coverage matchup, which would include what Houston did last year, they have it as basically a neutral one for Evans.
Okay. Yeah. So he's talking about if you go to offense. Wait, no, that's under receiving wide receiver coverage matchup. And then you can sort by team. But again, they have not updated this. So they have, players on the wrong teams. Rookies are not in here.
Play last week? I don't remember.
What did you say?
Who did Houston play last week? I don't remember.
Oh God. Who did Houston play last week? I also don't remember. I'm not going to look it up. All right. let's move on to Chargers at Raiders. On the Chargers, we have Ladd McConkey is 6,900 projected for 44% ownership. Keenan Allen, 4,800 projected for 33% ownership. Quentin Johnston, 5,400 projected for 22% ownership. Keandre Lambert-Smith is min price. Trey Harris is 3,200. They're not getting any kind of ownership. Darius Davis also not getting any kind of ownership. Let's pull up the receiving page for the Chargers. So last week was Ladd McConkey, 93% route participation, QJ 88%, Keenan Allen 78%, Keandre Lambert-Smith 17%, Trey Harris 12%, and Darius Davis 7%. So the first thing that stands out to me is there any way that QJ actually is only 22% owned? Because that to me would be kind of shocking, and that's what everybody has him at. It's not just you guys. Everybody has him at just like 22% ownership, and seems like a great play at 22% ownership. But I question it. I think I just kind of assume, based on the fact that he was awesome last week, that he's going to be higher owned. What
I
do you
think it makes sense when you look at what's around him. Egbuka's like $400 more. You have Nico on the slate. You have Evans on the slate. You have McConkey on the slate. Allen is cheaper. Like, people are obviously going to play Keenan Allen at 4,800 or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard. Like, I agree with you as far as like he scored 2 touchdowns in week 1, but I think if you were to like really elevate the ownership for Quentin Johnston, you have to be taking it away from some combination of Keenan Allen, Egbuka,
True.
guys in that range, which I have a very easy time arguing for why they would be even more popular than projected as well.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's why ownership projections are usually going to be better than just kind of instincts for this kind of stuff. It just like, it strikes me as low based on not only the 2 touchdowns, but then it's also been like just so much buzz. So it's just one of those situations like, oh, they're talking about Harbaugh being like, what comes to mind to me is in your face. Just all the talk about Quentin Johnston. It's like, I think people are going to want to play it, but yeah, maybe not too much more anyway. How much do you get into of, are you going back to Ladd at 6,900? Do you play in Keenan Allen? Who you getting to on the Chargers?
I'm under on all of them right now, which again just goes back to how little Herbert I had. The more Herbert I get, obviously I'm going to get to more of those receivers. They all look good. The pricing is fine on all of them. The thing that really stood out from week 1, well, for one, Quentin Johnston ran a ton of routes. Like you said, he ran like just north of 80%. Keenan Allen was just shy of 80%. I expect, you'll see similar from both of them, but Keenan Allen did dominate targets per route run. He was at, I think, like 0.31 targets per route run. Obviously I think you're going to see that change week to week. Like, some weeks it's going to be McConkey's higher, some weeks Allen is going to be higher. It's probably not very common that Johnston will be higher, but I think you'll kind of see those two fluctuate. My takeaway is basically that like Keenan Allen is certainly underpriced at 4,800. He is going to cut into McConkey's consistency at the very least. You will get, again, some games where it is just the McConkey show and Allen takes a back seat, but you're not taking a lot of risk at 4,800. So I do. And then, with Quentin Johnston, you are going to have less consistency. Like, he's going to get fewer targets per route run than either of those other 2 guys. And he's generally running routes that are going to have a lower completion percentage than either of those other 2 guys. But when you do get the completions, you're getting the touchdowns, you're getting the big plays down the field. So, he's just kind of in that role that he has always been in. So I think that all 3 of those receivers look like strong plays. They're also just kind of all getting squeezed out for me because I don't have a lot of Herbert right now. And, so I am getting, when you talk about $6,900 McConkey, I'm getting more Nico. I'm getting more Evans. I'm getting way more Jacoby Myers than I am Keenan Allen, which is in part because I have Geno so much. So yeah, I think they're all good plays, but I am also under the field by quite a bit on all of them.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking up. I just pulled up last year. I wanted to see the ADOT for Quentin Johnston to fact check you, because I read somewhere, somebody, I forget where it was, but football guys, some football guy was talking about how they figured out how to use Quentin Johnston this year, and they're getting him the ball shorter. They're not just making him catch the ball down the field. They're using him a little bit differently. But he had a higher ADOT last week than he had in last season. So maybe they're kind of one of his throws is really far down the field and more of them were short. I don't know how you come down to this ADOT, but I thought that was kind of an interesting point where it's like, oh, maybe if that is true, maybe they have figured out a way that he's going to be more productive this year if they are giving him more like just catch the ball, then yak, just get your yards after the catch type stuff. But again, he had a 13.9 ADOT last week. So I don't know the discrepancy there between what I had read somewhere else and the ADOT here, because there is a discrepancy there. But I thought it was an interesting note if they are just like at least sometimes finding ways to get him the ball. So it's not as big of a concern with where he can't catch the ball, where it's just like get him those easy passes and let him do his thing. If that is the case, then that's obviously bullish for Quentin Johnston. But
yeah, that is an interesting one, like to pay attention to when, in this case, it's not a new team or anything, but if there's talk about it, but it like DK Metcalf, I didn't go back and look and see what he did yesterday, but he had like a 4-yard ADOT or something in his first game with Rodgers, compared to 14 with the Seahawks. You've seen week 1, at least Shaheed was down to like 5, whereas he used to be like a 12, 13, 14-yard guy.
Yeah, definitely something we'll need to pay attention to. Last week, at least the data I'm looking at here does not show me that he was being used in shorter area stuff, but it's definitely something to pay attention to. Keenan Allen, obviously awesome usage last week, 9 targets, 78% route participation. I agree with you. I like all of them. I haven't run any sims or anything. My instinct is that I'll probably my guess is that I would come in slightly overweight on Quentin Johnston if I ultimately decide that this ownership is accurate, but I don't know. I don't see, none of these ownerships look like that bad to me. They all kind of look like, yeah, that's about where I'd want to be. Also worth noting that Herbert, we didn't say this when we were talking about quarterbacks, but Herbert ran more last week than he did last year, and that was sort of expected that he his ankle was healthier. They talked about it a little bit in the offseason. So that's kind of bullish for Herbert, but again, maybe not quite enough that I'm gonna make him a huge focal point here. I do think that he's probably my second favorite quarterback on the slate. So maybe I'll get to these receivers just because I want to do the stacks. But that obviously doesn't help the receivers, just kind of maybe makes you want to get to a little bit more Herbert. Let's talk about the Raiders, because you keep on talking about Trey Tucker, who I agree. I really like him if he's going to be low owned. You actually have him at way higher ownership than anybody else does, and you're still getting to a lot. So that's interesting to me. But we've got Jacoby Myers is 4,900 projected for 62% ownership. Trey Tucker, 3,400, 25% ownership. Dante Thornton, 3,900 projected for 8.5% ownership. And then Jack Besh, Justin Shorter, not getting any kind of ownership. So to me, it's Trey Tucker and Dante Thornton, both pretty interesting to me at these ownership numbers. But I'm kind of surprised that you're getting to so much when you have him projected for 25% ownership. Because if you look, I really like him, assuming single digit ownership on Trey Tucker. RG has him right at 10%. 25% is I don't know that I want to be well over the field. Okay. Good.
I used an aggregate that had him at 9.
Okay.
So I'm glad you pointed it out though, because on my screen it has the 25 number, and I was just looking at it. I'm like, man, I'm fine with Tucker, but I don't want 70% of him at 25% owned when there's all these other dart throws too. Didn't realize that the ownership projection I used only had him at 9, and it had Thornton at 4. So I'm getting to 9 Thornton. I'm so 2x the assumed field in this case, and then I'm getting to 70 Tucker. If he's low owned, I'm fine with it. He's your prototypical boomer bust guy. He ran a ton of routes week 1, which is obviously good. He wasn't targeted much, which is kind of normal. You're contending with Brock Bowers, you're contending with Jacoby Myers. Now you have Thornton out there, who was targeted, I think, 0.21 targets per route run last week. I think Tucker was at 0.09, 0.1. I did lower his targets per route run from last year, but obviously, you're still expecting him to run a lot of routes. He's really cheap. So if his ownership is going to be similar to guys like, the Houston guys, if they're all going to be sub 10%, then I like it, just because I think he's going to be on the field more. And I don't think that there's anything that suggests that any of the Houston guys are drawing tons of targets when they're out there either. Higgins probably, you can expect to be a little bit higher than the others. But I think when you compare Tucker to the Houston guys, if ownership is similar, I prefer Tucker, because I think they're all going to be relatively infrequently targeted, but Tucker's just going to be running more routes, which means more opportunities for a broken play, more opportunities to get open, etc. If the ownership does adjust to where, those other guys are all sub 10%, and then Tucker's coming in at 25, then I do think I probably switch back to I'm still going to play Tucker, but I'm going to play more of the dart throw Houston guys, more of Sterling Shepard, etc.
Yeah, same exact page there. If he comes in at single digit ownership, then I would want to have a lot of Tucker. But yeah, once it gets to 25%, I'm like, well, that's kind of a lot of Trey Tucker, who does have a wide range of outcomes. I sort of think of Trey Tucker and Dante Thornton as being really similar plays. Like obviously Dante Thornton 54% route participation to Trey Tucker's 87% last week, so pretty different from that perspective. Thornton got 4 targets last week to Tucker's 3, and they're both Thornton's A.25, Tucker's 24. To me, they're both just like if they hit on a big long ball and score a touchdown, you're gonna want them at their salaries. It's not super likely, but it's also not like all that unlike it's gonna happen a few times throughout the course of the year. You've been talking way more about Tucker than Thornton, which he did run more routes last year, a little bit more involved, but I guess he's less expensive. But are you also getting to some Dante Thornton?
I have like 9-10% of him, which again, the ownership projection that I used was like 4, so it still puts me over the field there.
Yeah.
I think it's probably actually I don't really know what's driving it. It's probably the routes. Like we have similar projections on Thornton and Tucker. Tucker, is running more routes, which puts him on the field more. He is $500 less, but I also have a lot of teams leaving salary on the table, as Sean just mentioned in chat. So,
yep.
Yeah, like I wouldn't be upset either if I'd probably actually be happy if I'm going to play 80% combined, which is what I have right now, Tucker and Thornton. I would ideally prefer, I think, a little bit closer gap where, maybe I have more Tucker, but it's like 60-40, 70, or what did I say, 80%, 60-20 or 50-30, something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like I do prefer Tucker if they're getting the same ownership. But I not by that wide of a margin. I think that they're pretty similar plays that have high upside, 0 floor. Kind of intriguing plays. Anything else on the are you playing any Jack Besh 5% route participation last week? Don't think we're playing any of that. So we can move on to tight ends unless you have any other notes.
Highest receiver.
Oh yeah, good point. We skipped right over Jacoby Myers. Yeah, let's talk about Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, I have him pretty much everywhere. The only reason that even makes me nervous is that Keenan Allen is the same price, and obviously you can make a very strong case for Keenan Allen too. So it does probably to some extent have to do with right now the gap that I have between Herbert and Geno in terms of my exposures. But I love the price tag on Myers here. Like he was somebody that I and a lot of people were bullish on coming into the season. And then you just saw it play out in week 1. He ran a ton of routes, as you expected. He had like 90+% route participation. He was targeted a ton. And there's nothing out there that suggests like those targets are going anywhere. As far as other guys to compete with for targets, you have Brock Bowers, who only ran like 65% of routes last week, which maybe it changes, but it could go down too. Like we don't know how he's actually injured, how injured he actually is. And we'll talk about that at tight end. But even if you assume that Brock Bowers is just playing a full role and everything, he's really the only high usage guy other than Jacoby Myers in this offense that we think is going to play at a solid pace, that we think is going to have a solid pass rate. And Jacoby Myers is good too. It's not like this is just some, de facto wide receiver 1 that is going to have trouble getting open and making plays. I mentioned at the top of the show, like I've, kind of tried to be as bearish as I can on any like priors or inputs on Myers to like not make him project as, the actual like top projected wide receiver or something on the slate. But I think he's closer to like in terms of fantasy production, I think he's closer to like the Mike Evans, Nico Collins type range than the 5K price tag range.
Yeah.
Like he's just to me completely clearly mispriced.
Yeah, and he's been like that for like 4 years running now. Just like where he's just like nobody wants to play him, and he just continues to produce. He's clearly so apparently DraftKings is aware that nobody wants to play Jacoby Myers, and then they priced him like somebody that nobody wants to play to try to get some people to play him. 4,900, just a little bit too cheap. He is projected for 62% ownership as a result of that price tag.
He should be he's the highest owned receiver on the slate, I think.
Yeah, and you think he probably should be at this price tag?
Yeah. I think that like you compare him to Keenan Allen, who is the only guy priced around him that is remotely comparable in terms of opportunity. And like, yes, Keenan Allen is live to get the same number of targets as Myers, but then you look at the competition, and you have Quentin Johnston, who is going to get a decent amount of targets, got like 7 last week. You have McConkey. For Myers, you really only have Brock Bowers.
Yeah. Brock Bowers, and then the A-dot guys, the guys who are getting a few targets,
running completely different routes.
Yep. And it's I think a fine matchup. Yeah, everything looks pretty good here. The ownership being the only downside there. So I think that's going to keep me. I don't think I'm going to be above weight to the 62%. Sounds like you are still going to be above weight to 62%.
He's at 98.5% of my lineups right now.
Yeah, Drew says Myers is lockable. So I will be rooting against him if Drew's going to be locking him into his lineups. But yeah, no, he's an obviously very good play. Now that we've talked about your favorite receiver on the slate, I guess we had to do that. Any other receiver notes?
No.
All right. Let's move on to talk about the tight ends. 1 second here. Kate Otten is where we'll start. Projected for, so he's 3,500, projected for 24% ownership. None of the other receiver tight ends on Tampa getting any kind of ownership. You can look at last week for the Bucks. Kate Otten, 73% route participation, only saw 2 targets in that game. He's one that I thought he would be more involved with Chris Godwin not out there. Still could be. We saw Egbuka, take up some of those targets last week. What do you think? Are you interested in Kate Otten today?
Yeah, I think he looks fine. He's in like 20% of my lineups. The route should be there, but it is probably some sort of a middle ground between what we saw last year after Godwin got injured and what we have now, where Egbuka, again, is just a higher usage replacement than anybody they had last year. Otten did run routes on like 80 to 85% of dropbacks. That obviously is good. He's cheap. He has touchdown equity in the red zone. I think he's just kind of your normal 3K to 4K tight end, where he's probably not going to get enough volume to give you a great score just on receptions or yardage or anything. But the combination of yardage plus red zone opportunities makes him fine. I had him projected for 15% ownership when I ran my stuff, which is a little bit lower than we have on the site. I got to 20%. I think it's just one of those plays.
I think it's worth noting that Adam keeps citing 2 numbers that are different from the numbers that are on the screen. And you might think that it's because Adam can't read, and that might be true. I don't know if he can or cannot read numbers, but I think you're using PFF numbers currently. You're not using the fantasy points for
for routes, you mean?
Yeah, so here, Kate Otten, 73% route participation is where Fantasy Points has him. We were actually talking about that this morning, that they calculate it a little bit differently. PFF will include some blocking as part of their route participation, is where we think the discrepancy is between
I like
Fantasy
the
Points.
way that Fantasy Points does theirs better, but I have PFF stuff in
front of you. You also have Fantasy Points stuff in front of you, by the way, just right here on the screen for you.
Yeah,
but I guess if you give those numbers, and people can kind of see the differences in the way they're calculated. Just want to point that out, because you keep on citing to numbers. And I'm like, well, that's not what it says on the screen right in front of us, and that might be confusing for people.
I thought you were talking about me mentioning different ownership numbers. I was like, I think I made it clear that I aggregate ownership.
Yeah. You also, you're just, all the numbers you use are actually different from what we're showing on the screen here. Just wanted to, for anybody who's confused why the numbers he's citing are a little bit different, is because he's using different sources. Okay.
The target per route run numbers are probably slightly different in a lot of cases too.
Yeah, all of the numbers I think are just slightly different. Generally not huge discrepancies, but worth pointing out. Cade Stover is hurt, so Dalton Schultz now being backed up by Harrison Bryant. Dalton Schultz projected for 23.5% ownership at 3,200. Harrison Bryant is 2,500, projected for 4% ownership. Pull up the Texans. So last week it was Dalton Schultz, 62% route participation, Cade Stover, 41%. I think it's probably reasonable to assume that Dalton Schultz's route participation is going to come up, rather than Harrison Bryant just taking over the Cade Stover role. But maybe he does. I don't know. What do you think is the likeliest outcome, and what are you doing with the Texans tight ends?
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth on it. Right now, I think I've kind of landed on I think Bryant takes most of the Cade Stover role. I do think Schultz plays more. If I remember correctly, and this could be wrong because I worked on Houston projections a while ago. But if I remember correctly, we didn't see a massive bump for Schultz in a similar situation last year. So whatever I'd seen, I didn't want to go too crazy on thinking that Schultz is just out there 90% of the time or anything now. But I do think he gets a bump here in terms of routes. The ownership does scare me a little bit Like the aggregate that I used has him at like 36% or something.
Jeez, okay.
And I think he's fine, but I do think Otten is a similar play. Like I think the best case for Schultz is basically that he is now equal to Otten in terms of opportunities, because Otten already has that, 80-85% ish role where he doesn't have any real other backup tight end. And then also, we haven't talked about it yet, but not surprisingly, I really like the Raiders tight ends. So,
Yeah.
or at least one of them. So that is also kind of driving my personal exposures there. So for Schultz right now, I only have 13%, again, with him projected at like 35. So I'm getting there. Like, I think he's very similar to Otten. I have 19% Otten. I have 13% Schultz.
Okay. And no Harrison Bryant, I assume?
I have like one lineup with Harrison Bryant. I do like with Harrison Bryant that like we know he is a capable pass catcher at least.
Yeah.
But, again, I assume he's basically caged over at best.
How many touchdowns do you think Harrison Bryant scored in his first NFL start?
3.
2. You know how I know that? Because I won the Millie Maker that day. Yeah, he won me the Millie Maker. He was his first NFL start. I thought he was like potentially going to be a star. That's why I played him. It was like great matchup with the Bengals. Nobody's playing him, and the way they talked about him was he might be a star. Turns out I just got lucky and got him on his one NFL like awesome game. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's had one or two since
Meanwhile,
then.
I'm just right about like every single player's future, and it costs me money.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunate.
I actually he was on the Browns then, right?
He was.
Yeah, my first 30K win back when I was still in law school was, I can't remember who the Browns tight end was in like 2016, but it was somebody that like always reminded me of it, or Harrison Bryant always like reminded me of him. But I remember it was a McCown and whoever their white tight end at the time was, Stack.
I am not coming up with the name. Maybe chat can help us. Can anybody come up with the Browns white tight end from 2016 or so? I'm sure somebody can. I'm not good at the remember a guy.
But it obviously wasn't.
You do who?
It might have been.
Was it Austin Hooper? Was he
it
on
might
the
have been
Browns? Might have been who?
I don't think it was.
You're just looking it up right now. That's cheating. You can't remember
John
a guy.
Said, Gary Barnidge.
Oh, Gary Barnidge. That doesn't even ring a bell to me. Okay. Anyway, we can move on if people don't want to play remember a guy. On the Chargers, also kind of a weird tight end situation. I guess Will Dissly ended up. Let me pull up the Chargers route participation here. They have sort of a weird like rotation of tight ends, but Dissly ended up running 51% of the routes last week. To Conklin 24%, and then was one of their Aranda Gadsden was inactive, I believe, last week. So could get more messy, or you're projecting him still out apparently. So maybe we don't have to worry about him. But Will Dissly 2,800 projected for 13% ownership. Tyler Conklin 2,900 projected for 2% ownership. I guess I can also let's look up the schedule adjusted numbers at the end of last year. Vegas was a great matchup for tight ends over the final 5 games of last year. Chargers were a little bit below average here. Houston was below average. Tampa below average. So 3 of these were below average matchups for tight ends. But Vegas was actually a great matchup for tight ends, but kind of a potential rotation growth situation here for the Chargers. What are you doing with the Chargers tight ends?
So it had to have been Gary Barnidge. Einsteinium said that he had like 1,000 yards that year. So that's who it was.
Did he really? That must have been like a year where I was not playing as much.
Yeah.
DFS or something.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know what you asked me, but I'm not playing the Chargers tight ends much.
Okay. That's what I asked you.
Yeah. You got more routes from Dissly, which I think you mentioned. One thing that I will mention, and this doesn't really affect anybody unless you're doing your own projections, I guess, but make sure that you're not using Will Dissly's targets per route run from last season, because he was injured a lot of the year, only played a couple games, but had like 0.23 targets per route run. If you go back to his time in Seattle, he's like a 0.15 guy. I certainly expect him to be closer to that than to be out there taking a bunch of targets away from McConkey and Allen and et cetera. So just something to note. But yeah, I mean, I think you're getting a timeshare here, but Dissly's probably on the better end of it. But both of these guys, you're just kind of hoping for like a random touchdown, I think.
Yeah, fine play is not obviously Dissly probably the better play of the two of them if he's running double the routes of Tyler Conklin, but And on 2-game slates, it's worth noting that like on some 2-game slates, at least, the $2,500 guy who scores a touchdown, it's just like that's all you need. So sometimes I do
Right.
like to play the like super low owned tight ends because it's like they can really separate. I'm not sure if that applies on this slate if Brock Bowers is healthy. Like it's going to be tough, but still, I guess if Brock Bowers only scores 8 fantasy points and somebody else scores 7 at much cheaper price tag, it's easier for these really cheap tight ends to separate on a 2-game slate than it is on like a main slate.
Yeah, absolutely. There are two things though that I think make me like them a little bit less on this specific slate than on a typical 2-game slate. One is that the pricing is really soft.
Yeah.
When you have Jacoby Myers sub 5K, you have Keenan Allen sub 5K. Like I'd already mentioned, I have a lot of lineups that are leaving substantial salary on the table. It makes the cheap tight end in flex type build not really that
Right.
exciting or viable.
Yeah.
And then when you think about the Raiders, you have Brock Bowers, who is just clearly far and away the highest projected tight end. And the biggest question mark about Brock Bowers is his health coming into this game. If Brock Bowers is limited, we just saw Michael Mayer run like 45% of routes. This is somebody that was thought of as a quality pass catcher. They actually were targeting him quite a bit in that last game. He's 3,300. So one, he's perfectly fine as a standalone play, but two, of the like subset of games that Brock Bowers does not have a good game, a high percentage of that subset, I think, involves a $3,300 tight end having a very good game for the Raiders. So it again makes like the other cheap tight ends not as appealing.
Yeah, no, that is definitely a good note, with the loose pricing, because a lot of the appeal is going to be when they're 2,500 and you just have really tight pricing, so they allow you to get to a lot of other plays and you get them at really low ownership. We also don't have like super low ownership on any of these tight ends that are interesting today, so it doesn't apply as much, I think, as most 2-game slates. Yeah, it's good breakdown. So speaking of those Raiders tight ends, Brock Bowers 6,300 projected for 47% ownership. Michael Mayer 3,300 projected for 6% ownership. As you noted last week, both obviously Bowers is going to be involved, although maybe less than some people were expecting last week in terms of the route participation. But then Michael Mayer 41% routes last week, maybe more involved than people were anticipating. What are you doing with the Raiders tight ends?
So right now I have 81% Bowers and I don't have Mayer. I want a lot of some combination of Raiders tight ends. And again, like somebody just in chat said, Bowers plus Mayer. You could, but again, you're running into the issue there where in a lot of those lineups, you would actually need Mayer to outscore like Keenan Allen or Jacoby Myers or whatever because of the way salary is on this slate. But again, it's just I think one of them is the best tight end play. It's either Bowers because he is relatively healthy and even like last week, he only ran routes, 60, 65% of the time, but his target per route run went up, which is something that, you do generally see that sort of scale where the more routes you run, the lower your targets per route run is going to be and vice versa. Like if he's on the field for a limited number of times, limited number of routes, it's not a good thing, but it's not necessarily like a bad thing either. If it's just, okay, we're just not going to waste our time with him being out there when he's not going to be involved. So like he was still very, very heavily targeted when he was on the field. If he's close to 100%, he's just clearly the best tight end on a slate where you don't need savings. And if he's banged up, then I think at worst, Michael Mayer is the same or very similar to like a Cade Otton or a Dalton Schultz and potentially even better. And then you do also have even if Bowers is fully healthy, if they played exactly like they did week one, there is still the path to, Mayer is still very similar to these other cheap tight ends just in terms of projection himself. So my approach right now, I knocked a little bit off of Bowers' route participation just to try and account for the fact that we have no idea. And or at least I have no idea. I find it very difficult to project confidently situations like this because for like every time you can think of it's one of those where like you feel like an idiot either way. If you turn the game on and Bowers isn't even on the field to start the game, you're just gonna be like, wow, I thought this guy that was barely practicing during the week with a knee injury was going to have a normal role. Or if you project him to barely play, and then he just goes out there and has a normal game, you're going to be like, wow, I'm an idiot. I didn't play Brock Bowers on a 2-game slate. So I pretty much treated it like normal, except, did dock him a little bit. But even doing that, it makes him just so much better than everybody else. The value component doesn't really matter a lot on this slate. To me, it's just, even though he's obviously going to be popular, he's going to be the highest owned tight end. It's just kind of one of the bigger edges to just say, like, all right, 50% of the field is going to not play the only really good tight end on the slate, and 50% is going to play him. I'll just be in the half that does.
Yeah, if he is healthy, like what percentage of the time do you think he outscores every other tight end on this slate by at least 5 fantasy points? Like, is it more than 50% of the time that he outscores every other tight end by at least 5 fantasy points? I think so.
So what's the well, you said at least 50% of the time?
Yeah.
It's probably lower than that.
You think so? Kate Otten.
So like
Dalton
we have
Schultz.
him projected 6-ish points higher than Otten and Schultz.
Okay.
So,
but that's with him limited, right? That you're that's after giving him a dock.
Somewhat limited.
But yeah, all right. So maybe a little bit less than 50%.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to like think it through in my head. Like that would tell you that around 50% of the time you expect him to win by like 6 points. Or yeah, so I guess around 50% of the time.
Right. Whatever. But that's on each of them individually. But then when you account for both of them, I don't know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was originally going to say, I guess, was like,
yeah,
that's on average, which would be around 50%. But there are going to be games where, Otten goes off or Schultz goes off or somebody else, whatever.
Yeah. There's a lot of tight ends to account for. So it's him versus the field in this math equation that doesn't really matter at all for this decision. Just trying to think through the, like, how often does he just absolutely dust the field, and 5 points wouldn't even be dusting the field at his price tag. You actually need better than that, but it's a lot of the time. Yeah, true. You also don't necessarily, because we have such soft pricing. We don't really need him to absolutely crush everybody else. Yeah, he's an objectively good play. So how much do you say you're getting? Like 80% Bowers?
Yeah, which I'm fine with. The actual thing that I'm probably most not fine with right now is that the other 20% isn't Mayer.
Right. Yeah, you're not just like, which maybe you don't want the whole other 20% to be Mayer, but like you want some portion of that to be Mayer for sure.
Right. I'd be fine if I had 100% Raiders tight end exposure.
Yeah. I think that, like, they're both talented.
Not something I would force. Like, obviously playing
no.
Schultz is fine, playing Otten is fine, playing whoever is fine. But like if that came out and it was just like I'm playing Bowers 80% of the time, and if I don't have Bowers, I have Mayer, I would not be upset about that at all.
No, yeah, that seems totally viable on this slate. All right, any other tight end notes?
I sort of mentioned it when we were talking about him, but I do think it's interesting that not only did they go with the 2 tight end stuff a lot, which does also obviously impact wide receiver routes. Like Thornton and others can only run so many routes if they're running a lot of 2 tight end sets. But also, I did find it interesting that Mayer was relatively heavily targeted on a per route basis in that game. I always just try and kind of pay attention when you get a coaching staff change and you have a talented but like quote unquote bust on the roster, where he was there was a lot of hype around him.
Second round pick, I believe.
Yeah, second round pick, I think. I might be mixing him up with Kmet, but Kmet's the same exact thing that I'm kind of alluding to, where he's still on the roster. He hasn't done necessarily what you expected in his first couple of years, but now you have this whole new set of eyes and coaches coming in and saying like, okay, this guy was talented. We did expect a lot out of him. Is he going to be utilized differently? Is he going to be more involved? So it did stand out to me week 1 that not only was he running routes, but they were actually throwing him the ball too.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the quote. I think there was a Chip Kelly quote that he's like, I've loved Michael Mayer ever since I got here. I'm trying to find the quote, but yeah, he kind of mentioned that like he's a big fan of Michael Mayer, and it kind of came out in week 1. So it's like sometimes the coaches say things and you're like, well, maybe they're just being positive because that's what coaches do. But in this case, it's like he said that, and then also they played him a lot in week 1. So you kind of believe it that he probably is a big fan of Michael Mayer. Yeah, that's a good point. This is a new coaching staff. They seem to like him a little better. There's also like last year, Michael Mayer missed half the season, I think, for undisclosed reasons. Like we have no idea what was going on there, but clearly he's back with the team now. And then had a big role in week 1. All right. On to defenses. I don't have any super strong takes here off the top of my head. I'll give you the ownerships here. Tampa projected for 25% ownership at 2,800. Houston projected for 30% ownership at 3,000. We can just do this pretty quickly, I think. The Chargers, 27% ownership at 3,200, and then the Raiders, 17% ownership at 2,600. Do you have any favorite defenses?
No, I think they're mostly around the same. With it being a 2-game slate, I certainly don't mind playing like Chargers with my Raiders. That's one way I think you can be somewhat different. And I am getting to actually a lot of the Chargers right now, which again, like if you're expecting, especially with being a 2-game slate and it being full PPR, if you're expecting Geno to throw a lot, that does increase the upside for the defense to make plays as well. And they only have 3 other ones that they have to beat. So certainly don't mind playing Chargers and my Raiders. Probably wouldn't like the Chargers to actually be my highest on defense like they are right now. But at the same time, I don't really have any issue with that either. And it does, to some extent, when you think through correlations too, if the Chargers defense like scores a touchdown, they're actually taking possessions away from Herbert and Allen and those guys that like I didn't play a lot of.
True. Yeah, that's a good call. That's always a good note on these shorter slates. Like if you're using an optimizer that has rules, like I would not set the rule to not play your defense against your quarterback, anything like that. You want to make sure that you allow for that kind of stuff on a 2-game slate.
Yeah, I'm actually not getting a lot of the Raiders defense, which is I think it through like, again, I'm kind of okay with because I have so much of the passing game. I want all of those possessions. I want all of the touchdowns coming, through the passing game offensively. And then I'm not playing a lot of Chargers passing game, but I am playing a lot of Hampton. So ideally for like a lot of my lineups, the Chargers go more run heavy, and that does kind of limit the upside that your defense has.
Yeah. I think that's all we really need. I mean, defenses, I don't know if we're taking any huge stands here. We're probably going to be pretty spread out. The field is pretty spread out with the defenses. We don't usually do a ton of the like questions on here, but we did have a question. So I moved it down to the final. Richie says, would you rather 20 from Bowers or 14 from Schultz at their prices and ownership? It's probably Schultz for me.
14 is probably high enough that I would just want both.
Yeah, true.
If I could only pick one, I probably want the 20 from Bowers. I think it's really difficult for 20 on a 2-game slate to not be in a winning lineup.
Yeah, it depends on how the rest of in one of the games, like 2 tough defenses in the Tampa. It really depends on how that game, how the scoring goes. Obviously, it
really just comes down to that Keenan is 1,500 more than Schultz, and Myers is similar. And those guys project more than 14, I think, or at least close. I think they're both over 14.
Close enough, yeah.
So like those guys are both probably beating that 14 number. And like, where are you making up the salary? Like, I think I would just want 20 raw points.
Yeah, I think that's also a fair assessment. Yeah, maybe that's right, because then there are enough other cheap players that can beat out 14 potentially, but 14 is also a pretty big score. So I think you're right. Ultimately, you'd want both.
I would guess there's a better chance that you want both than that you don't want the 20.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's fair. All right, we can get out of here, Adam. We've been through the entire game. Do you have any other notes on like 2-game slates? You leaving salary on the table? Any other kind of advice for people game stacking? What are you doing?
I mean, everything obviously slate dependent. I would say that just one thing that stood out to me kind of looking through the lineups that I built before the show was that I am leaving salary on the table a pretty good amount. And this is a slate where I have no issue with that. Like if I look at some of the lineups where I am leaving salary, there's no players that I necessarily feel horrible about. Like there's one here where I'm leaving 1,500. My weakest player is Trey Tucker. Yeah, I guess like that could be Keenan Allen, which obviously I would like it to be Keenan Allen, but then that lineup is just going to be duped way more. So, it's obviously you're sacrificing projection there, but it's still a good lineup. And Trey Tucker is going to beat Keenan Allen not high, but like
some percent of the time,
not close to 0% of the time.
Right. Yep. All right. Anything else to shout out, Adam? Anything, any content? Are you doing MLB today? Anything else?
Probably not doing MLB. Gonna just be working on football stuff. But no, that's it.
How are y'all doing in best ball? We don't want to talk about it, Josh. No, it's going fine. It's whatever. My Vikings. I'm not loving how the Vikings looked last night, so that painful right now. But in general, I think it's going okay. Also,
not loving Justin Fields having a concussion.
Me neither. He's also a player that I have a ton of. And then my two, I made 3 555 teams on DraftKings, and 2 of them are like right in contention to be like advancing right now. They're in 3rd and 4th place, but like within 10 points of advancing. And one of them is down to just Kyler Murray because it was Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow, my quarterbacks. The other one is down to just Josh Allen, who broke his nose in the last game. Who I think he's fine, but it's like because that one's Josh Allen and Brock Purdy. So just like from that perspective, like all of my higher stakes are just like riddled with injuries, and it's brutal from that standpoint. But
I don't have much Russ. I don't have much Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
I don't think I had much Burrow though. I do have a lot, at least on FanDuel. I'm not sure about DraftKings, of Jonathan Taylor, which I'm really happy with.
I didn't think I had much Joe Burrow, but then because he's in my 555, like from a fees perspective, he's actually like makes up a decent amount of my portfolio. Yeah, so that's kind of rough. Anyway, we're going to finish up the show. Thanks, Adam, for joining once again. Thank you all for hanging out with us. I'll be back in just a few hours. I'm going to be actually before 4 o'clock Central. I'm going to be starting my evening show because I want to get through this slate once again and then both Showdown slates. So I will be back then. Appreciate all of you. Please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to sign up for Run the Sims, you can use it today. Use promo code Neil to get 10% off your first payment. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on Thursday.